Alright, I got the 9482 in the shop here. About got ready to go for spring. Just got one more thing to do to it, and that's this axle seal here is leaking. I went down and when we bought this tractor back in 14, one of the other axle seals, I think it was the other side on the front, was leaking. And I said something to the salesman at the John Deere dealer. He said, "Oh yeah, that's the only one that hasn't been replaced. The other three have been replaced." I think he had it backwards. I think this was the only one that had been replaced here because it hadn't. Because I had to replace the other three of them, and it's been a couple years. But now this one finally started leaking, and I have a feeling this one's got the old style axle seal in it, and I'll get into that once I get the planetary apart on it. But they've come out with an updated seal, which works a lot better, and that's what I've put in the other three planetary sets. So I can get it apart. Gotta get the skid steer in here to get these tires off and get into the planetary. Got one tire off. That's about the easiest way to do it right there. You'll notice there are going to be two cutouts. You leave those two nuts on there, and they hold the inside tire on. While you can do something with the outside one, and then you come back in, take those two off, and set it aside then, which is what I'll do here in a minute. Alright, I got dual off. I'm gonna go ahead and can't get it to roll over because it's still connected to the transmission and everything. But anyway, I'm gonna pop these row of bolts out and pop that loose and let all the oil drain down in this pan here and let it drain while I go eat lunch. Because that 85 140 is pretty slow to drain. Actually, it's really slow to drain, especially when it's cold like this. Yeah, like someone has been in here before, because of two different color silicones here. Got some red. The clear is the original. Looks like it's got a little bit of red on it there also. Someone's definitely been in there before. Had to take two of the lug nuts, had to heat them up. I couldn't get them to bust loose at 3/4 impact, so had to heat them up. Won't get two new ones because probably took the temper out of them. Using the torch on them because I had them red hot. Yeah, they weren't that hot. They had a little bit of red on them, but they were cooled off somewhat by the time I got the impact on them. Oh wait, I forgot here. And that's not what I want to do. They were thinking when they made these planetaries. That out. Except whoever put it back together was not thinking. Got to be kidding me. Well, anyway, I'll get this part. What's supposed to happen, they tap these extra, there's two holes, one on each side, and when you put it together, you're supposed to line it up with these dummy castings here. There's no hole tapped into here, it's just solid, and you can use those like pusher bolts to push that thing off of there, which that might still come off, but that's what's supposed to happen. Alright, got that thing popped off of there. Everything looks good, except this good thing took this thing apart. whoever has been in here before did not do a very good job of bending that little tab over on the nut there to keep it from backing off. It looks like it's just about starting to back off some. And if that nut comes loose, that tire will fall off. The whole thing will fall off in the field. Our versatile dealer said they'd had that happen before on them. If that little lock ring breaks or something, the whole thing will just walk off and fall off in the field. But it doesn't happen very often, or if something dumb like that happens. But yep, I'd use a lift to get this thing off, unless you're feeling really macho or something. You can get it off. Mr. Nate, he could probably lift it off. He's a pretty strong guy. But I decided to use the hoist because I'll set it aside, and then you got to use the hoist on this thing. There's no way you can ever pick that thing up. Alright, got all that apart, took that nut off. It was a lot looser than I'd have liked to seen it. It was just about loose enough I could take it off my hand. It's supposed to be torqued to 200 foot-pounds, which as the bearing wears it would loosen up some, but I don't think it'd loosen up that much, especially if it's been apart before. They probably didn't get it tight enough the way it was. Anyway, this thing's heavy. I mean heavy. And you don't want to drop any of this stuff because you'll put a hole in the concrete. Smash your foot, and all of it's very expensive. That thing, sliding that thing out of that big ring gear assembly out of here, you really got to make sure you got a hold of that because it's good potential to drop the thing. Oh, and then this, I guess that seal holds it in. I was thinking that bearing comes out, but it doesn't until you get the seal out. I haven't decided how I want to do this seal yet. I've laid this thing down that kind of makes a mess because there's oil in it, and I've also put the seal in when it's on end like this. It just kind of depends how I want to do it. I have to look, but I believe that's the old style seal there that just rubs on this here. You clean this up. I'll clean all this up with a die grinder and a wire brush. But see, I think yeah, that is the old style seal there. Now these new ones, they say oil side. They got, yeah, oil side right there. That lip rides on there. Doesn't last very well. Yep, I'll call you back. I'll get back with you here in a minute. Sorry about that. Anyway, what they made with the new seals, this piece slips into here and that just stays stationary. And this piece slips into the housing there and it stays stationary, and the seal actually rides inside of itself, so that it's not this part that is moving doesn't spin on the axle housing at all. It's all contained in the seal itself. Is how they've added those, and I haven't ever heard of those failing. Every one I've ever changed has had the old style seals in it, and so the rest of the wheels too. So that's yeah. And also, if you're changing it, put a new star washer on it. They're not that expensive. But I'll get everything cleaned up and come back to you here. Alright, I got stuff cleaned up and ready to go back together with it. Kind of lean this thing over just like this is good enough. Get the seal in. Got the bearing out, cleaned it back up and put it back in. It's got a little wear on it, but for 5,000 hours it's not too bad. Really critical to keep the axle oil changed, and I don't think it had very well, had been serviced very well before we got it. The oil was just completely black in it. And you know, the magnetic plugs, there's 6 magnetic plugs per axle. There's 2 on the main housing, and then it's common oil, but you fill it in 3 separate things because it would take forever for the oil to run through the bearing here to level all out. And then there's 2 plugs on each planetary, and all of them, you know, are just full of, you know, just the tiny little dust particles of metal. Supposed to change them every 500 hours. Most guys, you know, they just, I don't know, they just don't change oil. I don't know why. I don't know if, I don't know. Anyway, they just, you know, and it turns black, and then that, you know, probably, you know, they'll still run a long time, but eventually they wear out. You keep the oil changing these things, they're built heavy enough, they're, you know, the tractor's long gonna wear out before these axles will wear out. Now that we change it every 500 hours, oil's still gold when we drain it out. And you know, there's nothing ever on the plugs, and so I don't think we're adding to the wear hardly at all. But that's how that is. And then I'll put just a little WD-40 or something on here to help it slide in a little better. That's the outside, that's the inside, because it says oil side on it here somewhere. But that just goes in like that, and we've got it made up at driver over there. Put a bolt in that piece of plate and drive it in until it bottoms out, and that's pretty much it. Alright, procedure for setting this thing up. Got this nut here. We made this tool. They make, OTC I suppose makes tools for it. We just made this deal. Took some 1/2-inch square and welded it onto a plate, and then put a socket on the other side where we can get a torque wrench and stuff on it and turn this nut. Takes what you do, you torque it to 250 foot-pounds to make sure the bearings are seated, and you just keep turning it as you're tightening it like that, you know. And then once you get it torque 250, you loosen it back up just enough, you know, you just loosen it half a turn or whatever till it's, you know, finger loose, and then tighten it back into 200, and that gets you to the set preload on the bearing. So I've torqued it to 200. I've just bend one of the lock tabs over now, and then be ready to put the axle shaft in, and then the plate there. Alright, if you hang the axle shaft out here just a little bit, you can get it started in the pinion gears, or the planet gears here. Get those lined up, then you kind of can just roll the whole thing in, and it takes a little bit of jiggling and stuff, try to get everything lined up, but then it'll, you know, once it lines up, it goes in pretty easy into the ring gear. Then I leave it out about this far, and this thing's always dripping oil, so you gotta get some carb cleaner and go along, clean up each of these surfaces except for the very bottom, because it's still constantly dripping oil. Go on and put some RTV silicone all the way around it, and then wipe the oil off real quick at the bottom, clean it up and slap it in there, and that has worked good on a lot of these planetaries for me. If you had like a nice big, of course you have to disassemble everything, not really a good way to wash this, because this is the drippy piece here. You can't really get the, unless you just let it sit for a couple days. There's not really a good way to, you know, keep all the drips from off, you know, keep it from dripping, so you just got to work fast. But that's about what it is. Alright, I got that slapped up in there, and you basically just torque these to try to run them in at the impacts. They're probably a little tighter, but make sure they're doing at least 75 foot-pounds of torque. And then just refill the planetary with 75 140 oil. Which, when I had these things lined up, that doesn't quite line up with that, because what you do, you set this one right in the middle here so that it's halfway, and then you fill in this plug, and wait till it comes out that plug, and it'll that gets it full. Then you have to let it sit a couple hours, come back and check it, because it'll, when you pull the axle shaft out and stuff and take this off, it's going to drop the level in the main differential just a little bit, and so it'll have to run back in there, and then you can come back, top back off. There's a sight glass underneath there which you can check, but that's pretty much it as far as changing axle seal on a versatile. Really, that's about the procedure for changing an axle seal on any versatile. Older one's got a smaller axle and a smaller seal and stuff, about half that size, like on 875 or something. Torque specs on them are, I believe, you go to 200. Seat the bearings and you back it off and go to 150 then to tighten the nut up. And I don't know if you had like a 535 or something, one of the big ones. Nowadays, I don't know what the torque is on those, but that's pretty much it. It's about all the same procedure there, though. So be it here, and thanks everybody for watching.